The summer I turned 12, Savannah, Georgia, wrapped me in its sticky embrace. The air was thick with humidity, the kind that made your clothes cling like a second skin. My family had gathered at my grandfather's Victorian mansion, a crumbling relic of a bygone era, with its warped floorboards and windows that rattled in the breeze. It was my cousin Lily's 13th birthday, a big deal in our family, and the adults were downstairs, their laughter mingling with the clink of bourbon glasses and the faint strum of a guitar someone had pulled out. Us kids, me, Lily, my younger brother Sam, and a handful of cousins were banished to the attic to explore, which was just code for keeping us out of the way. The attic was a maze of forgotten things. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that slipped through the cracked dormer windows. Old furniture sat under moth-eaten sheets, and cardboard boxes were stacked haphazardly, their labels faded to illegibility. I wandered deeper into the attic than I ever had before, my sneakers scuffing against the uneven floor. That's when I saw a metal lockbox, half hidden behind a broken rocking chair, its surface dulled by rust. It was heavy, the kind of weight that felt important, and the latch gave way with a reluctant creak when I pried it open. Inside was a leather journal, its edges curling like dried leaves, and a bundle of Polaroids tied with a brittle rubber band. My name, Emily, was written on the journal's cover in sharp, deliberate strokes, the ink so dark it looked like it had been pressed into the leather with intent. My heart thudded as I opened it. The first page held a photo of me, maybe 8 years old, riding my bike in the driveway of our old house. The next showed me asleep in my bed, my hair fanned out on the pillow, the angle strange, like it was taken from above. My breath caught as I flipped through more pages, pictures of me at the park, at school, even in my room, some so grainy they must have been shot through a window at night. The Polaroids were worse. They weren't just of me. There were other kids, some I recognized from the neighborhood, like Sarah from down the street. Others I didn't know. Kids playing, laughing, living moments they didn't know were being stolen. My hands shook as I untied the bundle, the rubber band snapping against my fingers. One photo showed a boy, maybe 10, sitting on a swing, his face lit with a smile. Another showed a girl in a school uniform, her back to the camera, unaware. My stomach twisted, a cold dread settling in my bones. I didn't know what I'd found. Not exactly, but I knew it was wrong. I clutched the journal to my chest and ran downstairs, my footsteps echoing on the narrow staircase. The kitchen was warm, filled with the sweet smell of peaches and sugar. Mom was at the counter, slicing fruit for a cobbler, her hands sticky with juice. Dad leaned against the fridge, a glass of bourbon in his hand, his eyes half-lidded from the heat and the drink. I spilled everything, my words tumbling over each other, telling them about the lockbox, the journal, the photos. Mom's knife paused mid-slice, hovering over the cutting board. She looked at Dad, and he looked back, their eyes locking in a way that made the room feel smaller. Neither spoke for a long moment. Then Mom set the knife down, her voice too calm, too measured. Emily, you're letting your imagination run wild. You've been reading too many of those Nancy Drew books. Dad's glass hit the counter with a thud. That's enough. You don't go digging through Granddad's things and making up stories. You'll upset everyone. Their words stung, sharp and dismissive. I wanted to scream, to shove the journal in their faces. But their expressions closed off. Almost angry stopped me cold. I mumbled an apology and went back to my room, locking the door behind me. I slid the journal under my mattress, its weight pressing against my mind. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept my lamp on, the bulb casting shadows that danced like ghosts. Every creak of the old house made my heart race. Who had taken those photos? Why did my parents act like I'd done something wrong? The next morning, I tried to act normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. At breakfast, Granddad sat at the head of the table, his eyes sharp despite his age. He asked about the attic, casual-like, but his gaze lingered on me a little too long. I mumbled something about old furniture and changed the subject. Lily noticed my quietness and pulled me aside later, asking what was wrong. I wanted to tell her, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I said I was just tired. For the rest of the summer, I avoided the attic. I stuck close to Lily or Sam, never wandering off alone. I told myself I'd overreacted, that maybe the journal was just some weird family keepsake, a scrapbook gone wrong. But deep down, I knew better. The photos weren't memories, they were evidence. Of what? I wasn't sure, but I hid the journal in my suitcase when we left Savannah, tucking it between my clothes like a secret I couldn't leave behind. Years passed, and I buried the memory, or tried to. High school came and went, and I moved to Atlanta for college, then stayed for a job as a graphic designer. The journal stayed hidden in a box under my bed, untouched but never forgotten. I built a life, dated, made friends. But I never went back to Granddad's house unless I had to. Family gatherings felt like walking on glass. Everyone pretending everything was fine. Mom and Dad never brought up that summer, and I didn't either. It was easier to pretend it hadn't happened, to let the secret fester in silence. But secrets don't stay buried. They rot, and they spread, and eventually, they break through. I was 26, sitting in my apartment with a glass of wine. When my phone rang, it was Lily, her voice trembling so badly I could barely understand her. "They arrested Uncle Paul," she said. "It's bad, Emily, really bad." Uncle Paul, Mom's younger brother, had always been the charming one, the uncle who brought us candy and told bad jokes. Now he was on the news, his mugshot plastered across every local station in Savannah. He'd been caught trying to lure a 10-year-old girl into his car near a playground. The girl had pigtails, a yellow sundress, and sneakers with glitter laces exactly like the ones I wore at her age. The image hit me like a punch, dragging me back to that attic, to the journal with my name on it. I called Mom that night. Her voice was brittle, like she was holding herself together with sheer will. "It's a misunderstanding. Emily, Paul's not like that. You know him?" Dad got on the phone next. "Don't stir things up. This doesn't have anything to do with you." But it did. It always had. I hung up, my hands shaking, and pulled the journal from its hiding place. The leather was softer now, worn from years of being untouched. But the photos were just as sharp, just as wrong. I sat on my apartment floor, staring at my 12-year-old self, and knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. The call from Lily stayed with me, a splinter I couldn't pull out. I spent the next few days glued to my laptop, scrolling through news articles and posts about Uncle Paul's arrest. The details were sparse but chilling. A 10-year-old girl, a playground, a car with tinted windows. The police had caught him in the act, thanks to a vigilant parent who'd called 911. But it was the photo of the girl that haunted me, her yellow sundress, her glittery sneakers, the way she looked so much like me at that age. It was like staring into a mirror of my past, one warped by the journal I'd found all those years ago. I called my parents again, hoping for answers, for anything that would make sense of the dread pooling in my chest. Mom answered, her voice sharp and defensive. "Emily, this is a family matter. Let the lawyers handle it. Paul's innocent until proven otherwise." Dad was worse. "You're not a kid anymore. Stop digging up old nonsense. This doesn't concern you." Their words echoed that summer in Savannah. When I'd run to them with the journal and they'd shut me down, I hung up, my throat tight, and pulled the journal from its box under my bed. I hadn't looked at it in years, but the weight of it felt familiar, like a wound that had never healed. I flipped through the pages, each photo a stab of memory: me on my bike, me asleep, me at the park. The Polaroids of other kids were still there, their faces frozen in moments of innocence. I wondered how many of them were still out there. How many had grown up carrying the same unease I did? A week later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Detective Carla Ruiz, a woman with a calm, steady voice that cut through my panic. She was working Paul's case and had found something in his apartment, a journal with my name on it, hidden in a false bottom of a desk drawer. "We believe you may have been targeted as a child," she said. "Do you remember anything unusual from that time? Anything that might help us?" I froze, the phone heavy in my hand. For a moment, I was 12 again, standing in my parents' kitchen, their dismissive faces staring back at me. Then I told her everything about the attic, the lockbox, the photos, the way my parents had told me I was imagining things. I described the journal I'd kept, its leather cover, the Polaroids, the handwriting that didn't match anyone I knew. Carla listened without interrupting, her silence patient but heavy. When I finished, she asked if I'd be willing to help them search my grandfather's house again. There might be more, she said. A hidden room, a storage space, something we missed when we searched it after Paul's arrest. I closed my eyes, picturing the attic. I remembered the way the floorboards sagged near the back wall, the armoire that seemed too heavy to move. "Check behind the old armoire," I said. "There's a panel that doesn't quite fit. It's loose, like it's hiding something." Carla thanked me and promised to follow up. I hung up, my apartment suddenly too quiet. I poured another glass of wine, but it tasted sour. The journal sat on my coffee table, its presence like a shadow I couldn't escape. I thought about calling Lily, but what would I say? That I'd known something was wrong all along and never told her? That I'd carried this secret for 14 years? 2 days later, Carla called again. They'd found the crawl space, exactly where I'd described it. It was small, barely big enough for a person to stand in, but it was packed with boxes, dozens of them, filled with journals, USB drives, and handwritten notes. Each journal had a name, some from Savannah, others from towns across Georgia and beyond. The USBs held videos, grainy and sickening, of children playing, sleeping, living their lives unaware. Some of the names matched missing persons cases, some going back 20 years. "We're still cataloging everything," Carla said. "But this is big, Emily, bigger than we thought. We need to know if you're willing to testify if it comes to that." I didn't answer right away. The idea of standing in a courtroom, telling strangers about that summer, about the photos, about my parents' silence, it made my chest tighten. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "Take your time," Carla said. "But not too much. We're building a case, and every piece helps." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the attic, the journal, the faces of those other kids. I wondered how many of them had parents like mine, parents who looked the other way. I texted Mom, asking if she'd known about Paul, if she'd ever suspected anything. Her reply came hours later. A single line, "You're breaking this family apart, Emily." I didn't respond. Instead, I called Lily. She answered on the first ring, her voice raw. "I saw the news," she said. "They're saying Dad might have hurt other kids. Not just the one at the playground." "I know," I said. "I found something when we were kids. Lily. In Granddad's attic. It had my name on it. And I think it's connected." She was quiet for so long, I thought she'd hung up. Then she said, I found something too. A camera in my room. When I was 10. I broke it and never told anyone. My heart sank. Why didn't you say anything? I was scared, she whispered. I thought it was my fault. It wasn't, I said, my voice fierce. None of this is our fault. We talked for hours, piecing together fragments of our childhood, moments that had felt wrong but never made sense until now. Lily remembered Paul watching us too closely at family gatherings, his camera always out, snapping photos no one asked for. I told her about the journal, the Polaroids, the way Mom and Dad had dismissed me. By the time we hung up, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. The next day, I drove to Savannah. My parents' house was quiet, the street lined with live oaks dripping with Spanish moss. Dad was out of town, but Mom's car was in the driveway. I let myself in with my old key, my pulse racing. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I went to Dad's office, a room I'd always been forbidden to enter. The door was unlocked, the room dark except for a sliver of moonlight. I started with his desk, rifling through drawers filled with papers and old receipts. In the bottom drawer, I found a single journal, identical to the one from the attic. The name on the spine wasn't mine. It was Lily's. The first page held a photo of her, maybe 9, laughing on a tire swing in Granddad's backyard. My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, the journal trembling in my hands. It wasn't just Paul. My dad was part of this too. I heard Mom's footsteps in the hall and shoved the journal back, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. She stood in the doorway, her face pale. What are you doing? Emily. Just looking for some old photos. I lied, my voice shaking. She stared at me, her eyes searching mine. You need to let this go, she said finally. For all our sakes. I left without another word, the image of Lily's photo burning in my mind. As I drove back to Atlanta, the journal from the attic sat in my passenger seat. A silent accusation. I knew what I had to do, but the weight of betraying my family, of facing the truth was almost too much to bear. The drive back to Atlanta felt endless. The journal, a heavy presence beside me. I kept replaying Mom's words. You need to let this go, and the way her eyes had flickered with something like fear. Did she know about Dad? Had she always known? The questions churned in my mind, mixing with the memory of Lily's photo in that journal, her laughter frozen on a tire swing. I didn't sleep that night. My apartment too small, too quiet. Every creak of the building made me jump, as if the secrets I'd uncovered were following me. The next morning, I called Detective Carla Ruiz and told her about the journal in Dad's office. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the exhaustion in it, the kind that comes from wading through too much darkness. That's significant, Emily, she said. But we need more than a journal to move on your father. Can you get us something concrete, documents? Photos. Anything that ties him to Paul's activities. The idea of going back to my parents' house, of facing Mom again, made my stomach lurch. But I thought of Lily, of the other kids in those journals, and I knew I couldn't stop. I'll try, I said. Carla hesitated. Be careful. If your dad's involved, he might suspect you're looking. Don't take risks, you don't have to. I hung up and stared at the journal from the attic, its leather cover worn soft from years of hiding. I opened it again, forcing myself to look at the photos, to read the handwritten notes scrawled in the margins. Dates, places, times, meticulous records of moments stolen from me and others. One note mentioned a shed out back, a place I didn't remember from Granddad's house. I closed the journal, my hands trembling, and made a plan. I waited a week, until I knew both my parents would be out, Mom at her book club, Dad at a work conference. I drove back to Savannah, The 3-hour trip, a blur of nerves and determination. Granddad's house was empty now, his health failing, and it sat vacant most of the year. I used the spare key hidden under a flower pot and let myself in. The house smelled of mildew and memory, the air heavy with the ghosts of my childhood. I went straight to the attic, my flashlight cutting through the dark. The armoire was still there, its bulk looming against the back wall. I pushed it aside, my arms straining, and found the panel I'd told Carla about. It was loose, just as I remembered, and it slid open with a groan. The crawlspace was smaller than I'd imagined, the air thick with dust and something sharper, like decay. Boxes were stacked floor to ceiling, their contents spilling out journals, USB drives, notebooks filled with maps and coded notes. I opened one journal at random. The name on the spine was Sarah, the girl from down the street. Photos of her filled the pages, some taken at school, others through her bedroom window. My stomach turned, but I kept looking, finding names I didn't know, faces that haunted me. I took photos of everything with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. Then I found something else, a small notebook, its pages filled with addresses and dates, some labeled Okefenokee. The swamp was an hour's drive from Savannah, a place Paul used to talk about, saying it was good for fishing. I tucked the notebook into my bag, replaced the panel, and pushed the armoire back. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard a car in the driveway. My heart stopped. I peered through the front window and saw Mom's sedan. She wasn't supposed to be home. I slipped out the back door, my bag clutched to my chest, and hid behind the azalea bushes until she went inside. My car was parked a block away, and I ran to it, my breath ragged. As I drove away, I saw Mom standing in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the porch light. She didn't call out, but I felt her eyes on me. Back in Atlanta, I sent the photos and the notebook to Carla. She called me the next day, her voice tight with urgency. "We searched the crawl space again, based on your tip. It's worse than we thought. Emily, we found remains 2 children, buried under the floorboards. They match missing persons cases from the 90s. And the notebook you found, it's a gold mine. Locations, dates, even names of other people involved." I sat down hard on my couch, the room spinning. "Other people, we're looking into it," she said. "But we need to talk to your dad. Can you get him to meet you? Somewhere public. Somewhere we can record." The thought of facing Dad, of pretending everything was normal while wearing a wire, made my skin crawl. But I thought of those kids, buried under the attic floor, and nodded. "I'll do it." Carla sent me a small recording device, disguised as a keychain, and showed me how to use it over a secure video call. I practiced pressing the button until it felt natural, but my hands still sweated every time I thought about it. I called Dad and asked to meet for lunch at a diner off the highway, a place we used to go when I was a kid. The smell of pancakes and coffee used to mean safety. Now it felt like a trap. He agreed, his voice gruff but not suspicious. I arrived early, choosing a booth in the back, the vinyl seats squeaking under me. The diner was half empty, the hum of conversation and clinking dishes a faint backdrop. I started the recorder and slipped it into my jacket pocket, my pulse racing. Dad walked in right on time, looking older than I remembered. His hair was thinner, his shoulders stooped, as if the years had pressed down on him. He slid into the booth without a hug, his eyes avoiding mine. We ordered food. We wouldn't eat pancakes for me, a burger for him. I picked at my plate, trying to find the words. Finally, I just said it. "I found the journal in your office. Dad, the one with Lily's name on it." He froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. "You had no business in my office," he said, his voice low. not denying it. How long were you and Paul doing this? I asked, leaning forward, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. He stared at his burger, his hands gripping the edge of the table. You don't understand. Emily, you're blowing this out of proportion. Then explain it, I said, my voice rising. Explain why you had a journal with Lily's name, with photos of her. Explain why you let Paul near us. Knowing what he was, he looked up then, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. They were tired, hollow, like he'd been carrying something too heavy for too long. It started when we were kids, he said, his voice barely audible. Paul was always different. He showed me things, taught me how to watch people, how to keep it hidden. I didn't know how to stop him. My heart pounded, but I kept going. You didn't just watch. You took pictures. You kept journals. You let him near me, near Lily. I thought I was protecting you, he said, his voice breaking. I kept him away as much as I could. I didn't know about the journal with your name until you found it. Paul swore it was a one-time thing. And Lily? I asked, my throat tight. Did you protect her? He looked away, his silence a confession. I wanted to scream, to throw my plate at him, but I stayed calm, the recorder capturing every word. I need to know. Dad, how deep does this go? He shook his head, his hands trembling. You don't want to know. Let it go. I stood up, unable to sit across from him any longer. I can't, I said, and walked out, the recorder still running, its tiny light a beacon in my pocket. I drove straight to Detective Carla Ruiz's office, the recorder burning a hole in my pocket. My hands shook as I handed it over, the weight of Dad's words still sinking in. He hadn't denied it, not the journal, not his involvement with Paul, his excuses, his claim of protecting me, felt like lies layered over worse truths. Carla listened to the recording with another detective, a man named James Carter, whose face stayed grim as Dad's voice filled the room. This is good. Emily, Carla said when it was over, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. It's not a full confession, but it's enough for a warrant to search your parents' house again. We'll move fast. I nodded, numb. What happens now? We dig deeper, James said. Your dad mentioned Paul teaching him things as kids. That suggests a long history. We need to know how far it goes. I left the station feeling hollow, the Savannah sun too bright against the darkness inside me. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to a park near my apartment, the same one where I used to play as a kid. I sat on a bench, watching families, parents pushing strollers, kids chasing each other across the grass. It felt like a different world. One I wasn't sure I'd ever belong to again. A week later, Carla called with an update. The search of my parents' house had turned up more journals, hidden in a locked safe in the garage. Names, dates, locations, a network that stretched beyond Savannah into small towns across Georgia and South Carolina. Some of the names matched missing kids. Others were still unidentified. We also found a map, Carla said. It points to a property in the Okefenokee Swamp. Paul's name is on the deed, but it's under an alias. We're sending a team out tomorrow. The swamp. I remembered Paul talking about it. His fishing trips. How he'd disappear for days with just a cooler and a rod. I'd never thought much of it, but now it felt sinister. Another piece of the puzzle I wished I didn't have to solve. Can I come with you? I asked, surprising myself. Carla hesitated. It's not standard procedure. Emily, it could be dangerous. I need to see it, I said. I need to know. She relented, but only if I stayed with the team and didn't interfere. The next morning, I met Carla and James at a staging area near the swamp. The air was thick with the smell of mud and decay, the buzz of insects constant. We piled into a van with a forensic team. The ride silent except for the hum of the engine. The property was a shack, half hidden by cypress trees, its windows boarded up. The door creaked as James pushed it open, revealing a single room with a dirt floor and shelves lined with boxes. The boxes held more journals, hard drives, even articles of clothing, small shirts, a pair of sneakers, a child's hair clip. My stomach churned as I watched the team catalog everything, their faces tight with the same horror I felt. Carla found a trapdoor under a rug, leading to a crawl space beneath the shack. Inside were plastic bins, sealed tight, filled with bones, human bones, small ones. I stepped outside, gulping air, trying not to vomit. Carla followed, her hand on my back. "You shouldn't have come," she said softly. "This is too much for anyone." "I had to," I said, my voice hoarse. "Those kids, they deserve someone to care." She nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "We're identifying the remains now. Some match cases from the 80s. Others are newer. Your dad's cooperation could help us close these cases." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "Don't call it cooperation. He's only talking to save himself." "Maybe," Carla said. "But it's helping. Because of him, we found this place." I didn't want to hear it. I drove back to Atlanta. The images of that shack burned into my mind. That night, I called Lily. She listened as I told her about the swamp, the journals, the bones. When I mentioned the journal with her name, she went quiet. "I knew something was wrong," she said finally. "Dad. Paul always had that camera. He'd take pictures of us at every family event. I thought it was just him being quirky." "It wasn't," I said. "And it wasn't just him. My dad, he was part of it." She didn't speak for a long time. When she did, her voice was small. "What do we do now?" We tell the truth," I said. "For us, for the others." The next day, I met with Carla and James at a coffee shop near my apartment. They laid out a new plan. They wanted me to talk to Dad again, to push for more details about the swamp, about other locations. "He's starting to crack," James said, his voice low over the hum of the espresso machine. "People like him, they carry these secrets for years. But when it starts coming out, they want to talk, to justify themselves." I wasn't convinced, but I agreed to try. They gave me a new recorder, this one smaller, hidden in a pen. I called Dad and asked to meet again, this time at a park near his house. He hesitated, then agreed, his voice wary but not hostile. I arrived early, sitting on a bench near a pond, the recorder tucked into my purse. The air was heavy with jasmine, the sun warm on my face, but I felt cold inside. Dad showed up in a faded polo, his eyes sunken, his hands fidgeting. He sat next to me, not too close, and stared at the water. "I know you went to my office," he said, not looking at me. "You found the journal." I didn't deny it. "Why Lily? Why any of us?" He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Paul had me trapped. He had evidence photos, videos of things I did years ago. He said he'd expose me if I didn't help him. I thought I could keep him away from you, from Lily. I thought I was in control." "You weren't," I said, my voice sharp. "You let him into our lives. You let him take those pictures." "I didn't know about the journal with your name," he said, his voice breaking. "Not until you told us about the attic." I confronted Paul, but he laughed, said it was too late, that we were in it together. "And the swamp?" I asked, leaning closer, the recorder catching every word. "What was that place?" His hands clenched into fists. "It was Paul's. He called it his safe house. I only went there once. I couldn't stay. What did you see? I pressed, my heart pounding. He looked at me then, his eyes wet. Things I can't unsee. Things I'll take to my grave. I stood up, my legs unsteady. You don't get to take them to your grave. I said, you need to tell the police. Everything. He didn't answer, just stared at the pond, the ripples catching the light. I walked away, the recorder heavy in my purse, knowing I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I turned the recording over to Carla, my hands steady this time. Though my heart wasn't, she and James listened in silence, their faces unreadable as Dad's voice admitted to the swamp, to Paul's hold over him. When it was over, Carla looked at me, her eyes soft but serious. This is enough for an arrest, she said. We're moving on your dad tomorrow. I nodded, but the words felt distant, like they were about someone else's life. I drove home, the Atlanta skyline blurring through my tears. My family was unraveling, and I was the one pulling the thread. Mom's text came that night, short and sharp. You've destroyed us, Emily. I didn't reply. What was there to say? The next morning, I watched from my car as police swarmed my parents' house. Mom stood on the porch, her arms crossed, her face pale as they led Dad out in handcuffs. He looked small, diminished, his head bowed. Mom didn't cry, just watched, her expression unreadable. I drove away before she could see me, my chest tight with a mix of guilt and relief. The news broke that evening, local stations, ex-posts, even a few national outlets. Savannah man arrested in connection to decades-long abuse ring. They didn't name Dad, but I knew it was him. I turned off my phone, unable to handle the flood of messages from friends, coworkers, distant relatives. Lily called, though, and I answered. They got your dad, she said, her voice flat. I can't believe it. I can, I said. I saw the journal. Lily, your name was in it. She was quiet for a long time. I need to see you, she said finally. Can we meet? We met at a diner in Atlanta, not the one I'd gone to with Dad, but another, quieter, with formica tables and a jukebox that didn't work. Lily looked tired, her eyes red-rimmed, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. I keep thinking about that camera, she said, stirring her coffee absently. The one I found in my room when I was 10. I smashed it with a book and hid the pieces. I never told anyone. Why not? I asked, though I knew the answer. I was ashamed, she said, her voice barely audible. I thought I'd done something to make him put it there. You didn't, I said, reaching for her hand. None of this is your fault. Or mine. She nodded. But her eyes were distant. What happens now? Our family. It's gone. I didn't have an answer. We sat there, two survivors picking through the wreckage of our childhoods, trying to make sense of a truth too big to hold. The preliminary hearing was set for the following week. Carla prepared me for the possibility of testifying, warning me it would be grueling. The defense will try to discredit you, she said. They'll say you're exaggerating, that you have a vendetta. You need to be ready. I wasn't sure I was, but I nodded. The night before the hearing, Mom showed up at my apartment, unannounced. I almost didn't open the door, but her face through the peephole pale, gaunt, like she hadn't slept in days, made me let her in. She sat on my couch, her hands twisting in her lap. I'm leaving your father, she said, her voice breaking. I filed for divorce. I stared at her, unsure what to feel. Did you know? I asked. About Dad. About Paul. About any of it. She shook her head, tears spilling over. I didn't know about the other kids. I swear, Emily. But I knew something wasn't right. The way Paul was always around, Always watching? The way your dad got so angry when you mentioned that attic. You should have done something, I said, my voice sharp. I was 12. I told you what I found. And you told me I was imagining it. I was scared, she said, her voice small. Scared of losing our family, of what it would mean if it was true. I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me. I laughed. The sound harsh. Kids died. Mom. Kids like me. Like Lily. And you looked the other way. She flinched. But I didn't stop. You chose your comfort over the truth. Over me. She cried then. Quiet sobs that shook her shoulders. I didn't comfort her. I couldn't. After she left, I sat in the dark, the weight of her words pressing against me. I didn't know if I believed her, if I ever could. The hearing was a blur of legal jargon and grim faces. I sat in the back, my hands clenched in my lap, as the charges were read: abuse, kidnapping, murder. Paul sat stone-faced, his eyes scanning the room like he was still in control. Dad looked broken, his orange jumpsuit hanging loose, his gaze fixed on the table. Carla had warned me not to expect much from the preliminary hearing, just a formality to move to trial. But I wasn't prepared for the evidence. Detective James Carter took the stand, describing the crawl space, the shack in the swamp, the remains. He talked about the journals, the USBs, the meticulous records that spanned decades. I listened, my stomach churning, as he detailed the cause of death for the recovered victim's strangulation. Blunt trauma, things I couldn't unhear. Lily testified too, her voice steady as she described the camera in her room, the fear she'd carried for years. When it was my turn, I walked to the stand, my legs unsteady but my resolve firm. I took the oath and told my story: the attic, the journal, the photos, my parents' dismissal, the journal in Dad's office. I didn't look at him, couldn't, but I felt his presence, a weight in the room. When I finished, the courtroom was silent, the air thick with the truth I'd finally spoken. The judge ruled there was enough evidence for trial, no bail. Paul and Dad were led away, their handcuffs clinking. I caught Mom's eye across the room, but she looked away, her face a mask of grief. Outside, reporters shouted questions, their cameras flashing. I kept my head down, Carla at my side, guiding me to my car. You did good, she said. That took courage. I didn't feel courageous. I felt empty, like I'd poured everything out and had nothing left. But as I drove home, the weight on my chest felt lighter, just a fraction. The truth was out, and that was something. The trial loomed like a storm on the horizon. But life didn't stop. I went back to work. My graphic design projects a distraction I clung to. But my mind was always elsewhere, on the journals, the swamp, the kids whose names I'd never forget. Reporters camped outside my apartment, their questions following me like shadows. I stopped watching the news, stopped checking X, but the story was everywhere. Savannah's dark secret. They called it, as if it was just a headline. Not my life. Lily and I started talking more, our calls a lifeline in the chaos. She told me about the nightmares, the way she'd wake up thinking she was 10 again, hearing the click of a camera. I told her about Dad, about the recording, about the shack in the Okefenokee. I can't believe our dads, she said one night, her voice thick with tears. How did we not see it? We were kids, I said. It wasn't our job to see, but I kept asking myself this same question. How had I missed it? The way Dad avoided Paul's house, the way he'd tense when I mentioned the attic. The signs were there, but I'd been too young, too trusting. Now, I saw everything through a new lens, every memory tainted. Carla called with updates, her voice a steady anchor. The swamp shack had yielded more than they'd expected: 6 sets of remains, all children, some identified, others still unknown. The journals detailed everything. Paul's handwriting meticulous, almost obsessive. Dad's name appeared too. Not as often, but enough to confirm his role. He wasn't just a bystander, Carla said. He helped move evidence, hide things. He knew what Paul was doing. I felt sick, the phone heavy in my hand. What about the network? The other people in the notebook? We're chasing leads, she said. Some of the names are aliases, but we've got a few hits. This goes beyond Savannah, Emily, maybe beyond Georgia. The idea of a network, of more people like Paul and Dad, made my skin crawl. I thought of the kids in those photos, their lives stolen by men who were supposed to protect them. I couldn't let it go. I started digging on my own, searching old family records, emails, anything that might connect to the notebook's names. I found an address in one of Dad's old planners, a cabin near the state line, listed under a name I didn't recognize. I sent it to Carla, who confirmed it was another of Paul's properties, bought under an alias. The police searched the cabin a week later. I didn't go this time. Couldn't face another shack filled with horrors. Carla called that night, her voice tight. We found more evidence: photos, videos, another journal, and a map leading to a burial site. We're still excavating, but it's bad. Emily, really bad. I sat on my couch, the room spinning. How many more? We don't know yet, she said. But your dad's talking now. He's given us 3 more locations, all tied to Paul. He's trying to make a deal. A deal, I snapped. He doesn't deserve one. I know how you feel, Carla said. But his information is helping us find victims, close cases. It's saving lives. I hung up, my anger a live wire in my chest. I didn't want Dad to be a hero, not even a flawed one. He'd made choices, terrible ones, and I couldn't forgive that. But I thought of the families, the ones who'd spent years wondering where their kids were. And I knew Carla was right. His cooperation mattered, even if it tore me apart. Lily came to Atlanta the next weekend. We met at a park, the same one where I'd talked to Dad. We sat on a bench, watching ducks glide across the pond, and talked about everything but the case. She told me about her job, her new apartment, her plans to adopt a dog. I told her about a project I was working on, a logo for a local bakery. For a moment, it felt normal, like we were just cousins catching up. But the weight of our shared history was always there, a shadow we couldn't outrun. I testified yesterday, she said suddenly, her voice soft. About the camera, about Dad. It was awful, but I had to do it. You were brave, I said, taking her hand. I'm proud of you. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I keep thinking about Mom. She's falling apart. She says she didn't know, but I don't know if I believe her. I nodded, thinking of my own mom, her tearful visit, her insistence that she hadn't known. I don't know what to believe either, I said. But we're telling the truth now. That's what matters. The trial date was set for a month later. Carla warned me it would be brutal, with Paul's lawyer fighting hard to discredit the evidence. Dad's lawyer was pushing for a plea deal, painting him as a victim manipulated by Paul. I didn't buy it, but I didn't know what I wanted. Part of me wanted Dad to face the maximum penalty. Part of me still saw the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd carried me on his shoulders at the county fair. The night before the trial, I got a letter from Dad, sent from the county jail. It was short, written in his slanting handwriting. I'm telling them everything. He wrote, not for me, but for you, for Lily, for the kids we failed. I know it's too late, but I'm trying. I didn't write back, but I kept the letter, tucking it into the journal from the attic. It felt like a piece of the puzzle, even if I didn't understand it yet. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized I was changing. The girl who'd found that journal at 12 was gone, replaced by someone harder, someone who'd survived. I wasn't okay, but I was moving forward, one painful step at a time. The trial was a storm, relentless and all-consuming. The courthouse in Savannah was packed every day, reporters spilling out onto the steps, their cameras flashing like lightning. I avoided the news, but snippets slipped through headlines calling Paul a monster, Dad a tragic accomplice. Ex-posts were worse, filled with speculation and vitriol, some calling for justice, others defending my family as if they'd known us. I stayed off social media, but the weight of public scrutiny followed me everywhere. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy with tension. Paul sat at the defense table, his face a mask of indifference, his eyes still sharp, calculating. Dad was different, hunched, diminished, his orange jumpsuit swallowing his frame. I sat in the back, my hands clasped tightly, trying to blend into the crowd. Lily was there too, with her mom, my Aunt Claire. Claire looked broken, her face lined with grief, as if the truth had aged her overnight. Lily and I exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of our shared pain. The prosecution laid out their case with brutal efficiency. Carla and James testified about the crawl space, the shack in the swamp, the second cabin near the state line. They described the journals, the USBs, the remains, 6 children in the swamp, 2 in the attic, 3 more at the cabin. The medical examiner's testimony was worse, detailing causes of death that made my stomach churn. Strangulation, blunt trauma, neglect. I closed my eyes, trying to block it out, but the words seeped in. Lily testified about the camera in her room, her voice steady but her hands trembling. She described smashing it, hiding the pieces, carrying the shame for years. The courtroom was silent, the weight of her words filling the space. When it was my turn, I walked to the stand, my boots clicking on the floor, a small armor against the fear. I took the oath and told my story: the attic, the journal, the photos, my parents' dismissal, the recording of Dad. I didn't look at him, but I felt his presence, a shadow in the room. The defense tried to tear me apart, questioning my memory, my motives. You were 12, Paul's lawyer said, his voice dripping with skepticism. How can you be sure what you saw? I'm sure, I said, my voice firm. I kept the journal. I have it. The lawyer faltered, and I saw Carla nod slightly from the prosecution table. When I stepped down, my legs were unsteady, but I felt lighter, like I'd shed a piece of the weight I'd carried for years. Dad took a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Paul. On the stand, he spoke in a voice I barely recognized, low and broken. He admitted to helping Paul hide evidence, to knowing about the swamp, to taking photos of Lily and others. He claimed Paul had blackmailed him, threatening to expose his own crimes. I was scared, he said, his eyes on the floor. I thought I could control it, keep it from touching my family. The judge listened, her face unreadable. Paul's trial continued. The evidence overwhelming. Journals, videos, remains. There was no defense, only attempts to shift blame. Dad's testimony sealed it, detailing Paul's methods, his obsession with control, his network of aliases and properties. The sentences came down on a rainy morning. Paul got life without parole, his name a curse in the courtroom. Dad got 20 years, with a chance for parole in 10. I didn't know how to feel anger, relief, grief, all tangled together. Mom was there, sitting alone, her eyes red but dry. We didn't speak. After the trial, I started therapy, something I'd avoided for too long. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Patel, was patient, guiding me through the layers of trauma, the betrayal, the guilt. It was slow, painful work, like digging through the swamp's mud, but it helped. Lily and I grew closer, our shared scars, a bond stronger than blood. We met for coffee, talked about normal things, movies, work, the dog she'd adopted. It wasn't healing. Not yet, but it was a start. One evening, walking through Savannah, the air heavy with jasmine and salt, I got a call from Carla. They'd found another site, based on Dad's information, a storage unit in Charleston, filled with more journals, more names. "We're closing cases because of you," she said. "Families are getting answers." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "And Dad? He's still talking," she said. "He's given us names, locations. It's helping." I didn't want to hear about his help, but I thought of the families, the closure they'd waited decades for. It wasn't enough, but it was something. As I walked, the city alive around me, I felt a shift. The truth was out, the secrets exposed. I wasn't okay. Not yet. But I was surviving. I thought of Lily, of the kids in those journals, of the girl I'd been at 12. I'd carried their weight for years. But now, I was letting it go, piece by piece. The road ahead was long, but I'd keep walking, keep telling the truth. For them, for me, and for now, that was enough.